Hi, this is a video on changing a quadratic function from standard form into vertex form. So here it's in standard form, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So just for example, it could look like this. Y equals 2x squared plus 12x minus 3. And we want it to look like this. We want it to look like vertex form, or we want it in vertex form so that we're able to find the vertex easily, and it just helps with graphing and things where you need the vertex. Okay, so we're gonna do it by using a method called completing the square. And in order to do this method, you can see that these brackets right here, x minus h squared, is what we would call a perfect square trinomial. Well, it's been factored. So here's kind of the skill we need. So I'm just going to show you this off to the side. So we need to know how to change a trinomial into a perfect square trinomial. So let's say I have this trinomial, x squared plus 10x plus 25. I know that this is a perfect square trinomial because when I go to factor it, so I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me 25 and add to give me 10. So 5 and 5. So I know that's a perfect square trinomial because it factors into the same two brackets. So here's another way that I could write it. Here's another perfect square trinomial. X squared plus 12x plus 36. And how do I know it's a perfect square trinomial? Because when I look for two numbers that multiply to 36 and add to 12, I get the same two numbers, x plus 6, x plus 6. So I can write that as x plus 6 squared. So here's what perfect trinomials have in common. A certain relationship between these two numbers. So you can see that if I take the number 10 and divide it by 2 and then square it, I will get, well, let's see, 10 divided by 2 is 5 and 5 squared is 25. Let's try it here. If I take the number 12, divide it by 2 and square it, 12 divided by 2 is 6, and 6 to the power of 2 is 36. So the middle term and the last term always have that relationship in a perfect square trinomial. So you can see how this x plus 5 to the power of 2 and then x plus 6 to the power of 2 kind of looks like that bracket right there. X plus h to the power of 2. So really, when we're completing the square, when we're changing some standard form into vertex form, we're really trying to create this perfect square trinomial. So let's try it with this one. Okay, so step 1. We are going to factor this a term, so this guy, we're going to factor it out of just the first two terms. So y equals, we're going to put a 2 out front, and then I'm going to check, okay, what do I have left from this term if I factored out a 2? Well, I just have the x squared. And then I'm going to say, okay, what do I have left from 12x when I divide it by 2? I just have 6x. I'm not going to bother with the 3 because it's not going to, I don't want it in there. I'm trying to create like these perfect square trinomials. And I know that this right now is not one. So I'm going to make one in the brackets here. So I don't want this guy to be in the brackets. I don't really care about that minus 3. It's just going to stay out there. Okay, so step 1, we factored out a. And only from the first two terms. So then in step 2, we're going to turn the brackets into a perfect square. X, a perfect square trinomial. So we got to figure out what do we need to add to make that a perfect square. Okay, let's take our middle term 6. Let's divide it by 2 and then square it. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 3 squared is 9. So our second step is to create that perfect square. Create a perfect square trinomial. So 6 divided by 2 is, oh, I already did that. So 9. So now it's a perfect square trinomial. But you can't just add 9, so we also have to subtract 9. And then we have the minus 3 out there. So it's weird that we're like adding 9 and subtracting 9, but it's because we don't want to change our equation. So we want to like make sure it's the same equation, but don't worry, we're going to move this minus 9 out of the brackets next. So then we'll just have our perfect square trinomial inside the brackets. Okay, so for step 3, we're going to move the last term out of the brackets. So when we move that minus 9 out of the brackets, it has to get multiplied by the 2, because everything inside that bracket has been divided by 2 when it got into the bracket. So if we want to get it out of the bracket, we have to multiply it by the a value. So that's going to become minus 18, and then we still have that minus 3 at the end. So that was how we moved the last term out. Okay, and then step 4 is we're pretty much done. Now we're just going to factor this into, we're just going to factor this perfect square trinomial. So I know that two numbers that multiply to 9 and add to 6 would be 3 times 3 would be 9, and 3 plus 3 would be 6. So in the brackets, we'll have x plus 3 to the power of 2. And negative 18 minus 3 will be negative 21. So for step 4, we're just going to factor our trinomial. So factor the brackets and collect our like terms. I'm just going to add 2, I don't know. For step 2 here, create a perfect square trinomial. Maybe you want to say that you have to add and subtract. Like just to show that you had to do both of those things. I don't know. Okay, so there is our equation in vertex form. So this is the method called completing the square. It takes a standard form and converts it to vertex form through a series of steps. And now we know that the vertex is negative 3, negative 21. So if you remember, it's always the opposite of that guy because our vertex form equation has a minus sign in it. So really that's actually a negative 3. Yeah, so it's always the opposite of the one in the brackets. So we have vertex at negative 3, negative 21. Okay, so this method is called completing the square. And that's it, the end. Actually, okay, feel free to stop it if you get it, but you know what? I'm going to do one more, but I'm going to do it like really fast. Just in case somebody wants another. Wants one more. And you could like pause it right here if you want to just try it on your own and then see if you get the same answer as me. Okay, step 1. The a value is just 1, so to factor it out is pretty easy. I'm already done. Step 2, I'm going to create a perfect square trinomial in the brackets. So x squared minus 8x. And to make my perfect square, I'm going to take my 8x. I take my 8 divided by 2 and square it. So 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 4 squared is 16. So I have to add 16 and subtract 16. Okay, then my next step is I want to remove 16 from the bracket. I want to get the last term out. So I just leave my perfect square trinomial, and I can just take the 16 out because there's no a value to multiply it by. There's just a 1, which doesn't change anything. Okay, so I'm pretty much done. I just have to factor my brackets. So multiplies to 16 and adds to -8. That's going to be x minus 4 and x minus 4. Which I could just write as x minus 4 squared. And then -16 plus 5 would be -9. Or sorry, what? Blah. -11, my bad. And then we can say we have a vertex at 4 and -11. So there you go. Hold on.